Let's go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for joining. My name is Brian Hotzik. I'm here with NCSI. I'm very excited to have you here today. Joining me today is Sam with Kiteworks. You mind introducing yourself, Sam?
Yeah, hey everyone, Sam and I'm a solutions architect here at Kiteworks. I cover the Rocky Mountain region as well as the South Central region. I've been at Kiteworks for about 2 years now. I work with a wide range of customers from small, medium-sized businesses all the way up to your large enterprises. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, awesome to have you here to have this conversation. So, for anyone that doesn't know who NCSI are, we're a little bit different of a reseller out there. We've got lots of cool things around our technology, being able to demonstrate it in ways like this that are maybe a little bit different than other organizations. We're actually a women business enterprise, like a women-owned small business, so we can qualify for like diversity spend and things like that. But we really like the technology. That's really is our focus. And trying to understand more about what our customers' issues and challenges are and trying to help solve them. And that's kind of what we're here today to do. So we can't hear you. So we'd like to have questions and so forth come up as we're going along. So please type them into the Q&A. There's a chat and a Q&A. Just please type it into the Q&A section there, and then we'll be able to see those questions and we can answer them as we go along or, at the end as well. But Sam, kind of the reason that I brought you here today is I want to talk a little bit more about some of the challenges that customers are bringing to me and, talking about. And, as it relates to things like security is just such a mess these days.
Absolutely.
There's a million vendors, there's a million different vectors I've got to worry about. Everyone's saying I need to be more secure. And then conversely, all I read in the news is how many systems have been breached, how much data has been exploited and things like that. So it seems like it's this losing battle that we're fighting. But, a lot of customers are coming to me and they're saying, hey, I keep hearing about this zero trust concept. It's really big in the past 2 or 3 years. A lot of vendors are talking about it, but it's really vague, right?
Absolutely.
It's not like a finalized framework of things.
Very much a buzzword.
Yeah, it's marketing got involved, right? We all know how that works. So now it's, here's your zero trust bagel. And, it maybe loses a little bit of meaning. But when I'm talking to customers, they come to me and they say, well, what does that mean? What is the concept of zero trust? The concept behind it is usually associated with not trusting the person or the device. Just because a user comes to me with a username and password, it doesn't mean I necessarily trust them, right?
Absolutely.
I need to be skeptical of that. Or just because this device is owned by my company doesn't mean I want to have carte blanche access to everything inside of my organization. But you know what? That's not enough, right?
No, it's not, right?
What other things are outside of that? If I can secure the user and I can secure the device, I don't know what else there is. So what's going on?
Yeah, so that's really what Zero Trust focuses on today, right? It's user authentication. Who is the user? What's the device they're logging in from? What are the trusted applications that they have access to?
Right.
But that's kind of it. Once that user has access, is authenticated, has access to that application, any content sitting in that application, they now have access to, right?
Sure.
And they're a quote unquote trusted user, but users make mistakes.
Oh yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So to your point, right, carte blanche access to content, they could potentially be sending out very sensitive information by accident, on purpose in certain cases, but there's really a risk management gap at that content level. We focus so much on the user and the application,
right,
but we kind of forget about the content, and that's really what we're trying to secure at the end of the day.
Yeah,
right?
If you really step back and take a look at it, who cares about the device?
Right.
The device is a hunk of metal. It doesn't mean anything to us. We care about the data. If a laptop is lost, it's not a big deal. Who cares? Oh, if it's got sensitive corporate data on it, suddenly it's the most important thing to us.
Exactly.
So that content, that data is where a lot of other zero trust models are falling short because they don't care about that. Oh, we cared about the user and the device. Who cares about the data? And we feel that that's a big weakness, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got to focus on that data. There's you talked about kind of malicious, but there's also just on accident. Well, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to email these sensitive personal identifying information to someone's Gmail account. I didn't know that.
Right, and any organization is going to have multiple third parties outside of their domain that they're interacting with on a day-to-day basis. performing their day-to-day business
Oh, yeah.
operations, right? So, and these are trusted third parties, meaning people that we know, people that we interact with on a regular basis. It could be a supplier, customer, outside legal counsel. The list goes on.
Yeah.
And information is flowing back and forth, between your domain and those users every day.
Yeah, and we've kind of created a little bit of a friction that exists between us and the user because we've created things like email. We said, oh, this is a great collaboration tool. It's amazing. You should use it in order to communicate with with outside people and even internal employees. And then we turn around and say, well, it's also full of spam and phishing, and you shouldn't be using it to send emails. So we're kind of giving them mixed signals about that. Email kind of is that problem of a good thing and a bad thing, that we're kind of struggling with.
Yeah, it's that constant battle in the space of how do we keep it user-friendly so that users are actually doing it, but also secure it so that we have that level of peace of mind.
Yeah, yeah, and again, my customers are coming to me and asking me, hey, we just keep getting more and more regulations. They've got these things coming down the pipe. If it's the NIST framework that they follow, or maybe they're a financial institution, have to follow the NCUA or the FDIC. There's always a regulatory.
The alphabet soup.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been hearing, my customers are asking about this new one, CMMC. I don't know much about what it is. What kind of regulation is that, and why do people need to be nervous?
Yeah, that's definitely front of mind for us as well. So CMMC is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification.
Okay.
And what it is a unified set of security standards that the DoD is now mandating for the defense industrial base.
Okay.
The defense industrial base is the DoD supply chain. Now that encompasses well over 300,000 companies. Right?
Oh yeah, that's everyone. If you make a sticker that goes on a piece of metal that goes on an airplane, suddenly you're in that supply chain. So that's
exactly.
huge.
It's everyone from your Boeings, your Northrops, your Raytheons, all the way down to some small machining shop that's making a single bolt.
Yeah.
Right.
That company still has to be bound by these regulations. And I think the solar wind style attack of a couple of years ago, that supply chain, what it is foreign adversaries are saying, it's easier to break into the tool that you use than you directly. So that's kind of where we're under attack. That's what the DoD is really concerned
Exactly.
about.
And it was a direct response to exactly that. Compromise of COI, which is controlled unclassified information, government created or government owned information that's sitting on these contractors' information systems and is getting leaked. So having a level of cyber readiness, cyber hygiene is necessary to mitigate those risks.
Yeah, and that really is the problem that we're under today, that we operate under a lot of the traditional models that we have out there. We created email. We said there's this amazing collaboration tool, but email's inherently incredibly insecure.
Right, and it's not just email, right? You have users using email. You might have another department using a cloud-based file sharing solution. You have a legacy SFTP server sitting out there. The information's flowing through all sorts of different tools, again, to all sorts of different outside parties. Creates a mess very quickly. Shadow IT is a big problem that we encounter, right? Someone is signing up for Box because they need to share some files, collaborate. It wasn't properly vetted by security or IT.
Yeah. The problem is that we unfortunately sometimes get the reputation of the Department of No. I need to send these files over to this vendor that I have. This is part of my job. My boss is asking me to do this. And what do? Oh, let's put in a DLP system that'll block that. And so from the user's perspective, we're just telling them, no, you can't do your job. And so they go around us. That shadow IT is a common problem. And we want to make sure that we facilitate that user. Let's make their lives hopefully a little bit easier. There's always that, kind of dichotomy of how do we make their lives easier and how do we keep things secure. With some of the stuff that we're going to talk about today, hopefully we can achieve, essentially both those results.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So kind of the subject of today, we wanted to talk about the private content network. That's kind of a concept. So that's a new thing to me. I don't know what that really means. So why don't we talk a little bit more about kind of how the world lives today, or what it looked like in the past, and then potentially how we could change that by introducing the private content network. So why don't we head over to the whiteboard and draw that up a little bit more about how it works today.
Yeah, definitely. So, like we were talking, right, you have your internal domain here, and then you have your trusted third parties that you're interacting with on a daily basis over here. Now, you have multiple tools sitting here within your network, right? You could have an instance of SharePoint, You have your email. You could have a network file share. Tools for moving content, tools for storing content. Now again, this data is going to be flowing outside of your organization on a daily basis, right? A user working from home could be logging into SharePoint. Someone could be sharing data out of your network file share with a customer. You could have, an analyst outside your organization communicating via email with your finance department. So you can see here, again, multiple tools, multiple third parties. It can very quickly create this mess of communication channels where you're not sure where the content is flowing. You have no idea who's accessing it. You're not sure where it's coming from. Oftentimes it's unencrypted as well, which is an obvious risk. So this is kind of what we want to focus on with the private content network.
And a couple of kind of problems that we talk about here. All of this stuff I have control over. I control my email server, I control my SharePoint server, those kinds of things. But the problem is, right, outside, I don't control that. So we fall into a little bit of a trap where people say, oh, the email's encrypted. Well, that's not the big problem, right? It's not the fact that it's encrypted in transit. Our biggest leak of information is not someone sniffing on the wire an unencrypted email. It's what do? They hit that forward button. They download that file and put it where they're not supposed to. The issue is that once they receive that email, encrypted or not, they then have access to do whatever they want with it, and that may not meet our security concerns, right?
Right, absolutely. Once it's out the door, you lose that control. You have no idea where it is, who's accessing it. It's a huge risk.
Yeah, so how do we solve this? Where does private content network, what does it mean, and where does it come into play?
Yeah, so the private content network is really designed to focus on that risk management gap that we were talking about earlier, where applying that zero trust to the content layer, right? We authenticate the user, we give them access to the application where the content is sitting, but we need to ensure that that content is secured. We know where it's going to the appropriate users. So that's where at Kiteworks, we come up with the idea of the private content network, the PCN. And what this does is offer a unified platform to handle all of these communication channels, right? So you can access your SharePoint, you can access your email, your network file share, all of it's going to flow through a unified platform. On top of that, and it's coming out to your users and third parties, they're authenticating into the platform. Everything is encrypted in transit and at rest. There's granular access controls over who has access to what content for how long. And maybe most importantly, it's tracked and logged in real time. So every access point, whether it's a system action, a user action, an admin action, it's in an immutable audit log available at your fingertips right away.
And that's something really important. When I interact with organizations, they oftentimes say, kind of funny sounding things. Well, I don't care if it's encrypted. I care if I can prove that it was encrypted. That audit trail is everything. If you can't do the audit trail, might as well not do it because you're still going to fail.
Right.
So it's the audit trail is so key.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when we talk about all the compliance alphabet soup, really that audit trail is, what you need to have for audits. Say a breach happens, you need to quickly be able to pull up that chain of custody for a sensitive piece of information.
Right. So private content network enables the sending of that content, that data, via many mechanisms, email being one of the most popular, but it could be, other mechanisms
SFTP,
as well.
APIs, managed file transfer, other cloud-based repositories.
Right. So I can then, inside my organization, I can send it out to people outside of my organization, and then the system can be in charge of the rules. I'm just a regular employee at the company. I don't have time to read all the rules and regulations. I don't know that I'm not supposed to send this content to that domain. But the system can tell me that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we so often talk about, users fat fingering something, making an honest mistake, right? And a lot of the cybersecurity discussion is how do we take those mistakes out of the user's hands, the decisions out of the user's hands. Hey, they sent it to a Gmail domain by accident.
Right.
No one at that domain should be accessing this file. Having those rules and policies in place that are going to catch those things and enforce the policy without relying so heavily on the user to do so.
Yeah, okay, great. We want to make it frictionless for our end users. let's jump out of kind of the theory and maybe show a little bit more of this in action. So let me come over here. I'm going to show you from a user's perspective. So I'm going to be a regular user in our organization. And I'm going to see how easy we can get this system to work. So like we talked about, email's usually the most common method of transmission from user to user. We have those other methods around, API and secure FTP and things like that, but users usually just do it via email. So there's many different ways that I can do this, but we've got this great attachment, a plug-in into Outlook as an example. So if I want to send a secure email, it's very easy for me. I could just open up an email message right here. I can do it many different ways. So, let's go to my desktop here. I've got my super secret file that I want to go send over here. I'm going to go up to the top and say, let's send it to, my email account and say, this is very secret. Don't tell anyone about this or whatever this information is going to be. So now when I have an option over here at the top, I can click that Send Secure. So it's very easy. It's going to open up this little sidebar over here. You can see by default, it already says that we're going to secure the message attachments. And then you can control it via policy. Look, I can't even turn off securing the message body. It's going to force it to be that case. Notice that I drug the attachment just as a normal attachment like users are trained to, but then now we've magically set it over here and say, well, we're not going to natively send this just like regular raw email. We're going to send it through Kiteworks. Kiteworks is going to run through all of its rules and policies and audits and all that stuff. And then it's going to send the user a separate email that says, you have access to this file. Please come and get it. And we're going to make them come to our private content network in order to receive it. And that's it. I click send. That was incredibly easy. This is not difficult for the user to be able to do that. And then from a receiving perspective, Sam sent me a message a little bit earlier. You can see a normal user would see it kind of in this manner. So there's no real information in here, and they have to click on this to pick up and go to a website. So this is that website that they would go and authenticate against. So they would go and authenticate in here, and they can receive it on the web page. But again, there's many different ways to do it. I find it very convenient to actually have it over here. I could go and add an account over here on the side and make it so that it would automatically interpret that information. So in this case, I'm going to authenticate against that particular system, and then I would have it automatically decrypted. So we're just going to type in, oh, it's right there. We're going to type in the credentials that were set up for this particular user. And now I'm authenticated not only to my own Kiteworks instance, because in this example, my vendor that I deal with, they have Kiteworks as well. And it gives me the ability to, I've got to accept the terms of service and a couple of other things. During that account creation process, you can control like how complex the password needs to be. Is there a EULA that they need to sign? Things like that. But now it exists in, authenticated in the plugin. So those messages are just going to natively come in. I don't need to do anything special. And it's going to interpret them for me. So it's really great to be able to make it easy for our users. So they do have a portal that they can go and log into, as you can see it right here. So I can send messages from here. I can read those messages. I can control all of that kind of stuff. So if I want to use the portal, great, I can use the portal. If I want to use my own Outlook, great, I can use my own Outlook. If I want to use it like natively inside of the tool, look, we've even got a share and a send option like directly inside of a Word document. So lots of different ways to make it easy for the user. I don't want to say you have to do it this one and only way. No, let me give you 4 ways of doing it, but it's all going through that one central control of policy. It would deny it if I'm not allowed to send it, things like that. So from a user's perspective, incredibly easy and straightforward to use. Why don't we switch over to Sam real quick, and he can tell us a little bit more about the back end and what administrators would look like.
Awesome. Thanks, Bryan. So we're looking at the administrative console here. This is what the system administrators have access to. This is where your application and system configuration happens, a lot of those policy settings that we talked about, as well as access to those audit logs. And visibility is a huge part of the private content network and what we do here at Kiteworks. You need to be able to see where the data is flowing. So here I'm viewing our CISO dashboard. I can see where my deployment is clustered across the globe here. And then I can layer on different activities along the right here that I might be interested in to see some aggregate level activities. So if I'm interested in things like failed logins, for example, or uploads and downloads, And these are all point and click interactive, where I can click into these loops and bubbles and see information about the when, the who, and the what. So from an administrative perspective, I can come in here and see all the metadata around a particular transaction. So this is obviously extremely, powerful, especially when we talk about meeting those compliances, performing those audits, being able to have that exact paper trail, if you will, of content transactions. A cool thing I always like to show here too, right? The Kiteworks appliance is extremely hardened, right? So we can see all these failed logins. If we click into these, you can see, these are people that are trying to, brute force SSH. They see the ports open. They're trying to brute force password in. We have embedded fail to ban built into the platform that will go ahead and ban those IPs after a specified amount of login attempts. Things like embedded intrusion detection, network firewall, web application firewall. This appliance has been extremely hardened. If I come over here to the activities report, this is the same exact data, just in that running log format. So again, I can filter by various activity types, change my date range. I can search on activities or maybe even a particular user, like Brian here, and I can quickly pull up all the activity that pertain to him. So I can see exactly what he's been up to, what he's been sending, when he's been logging in, where he's been logging in from. It's all in real time. So it's at your fingertips immediately. You don't have to come to Kiteworks to ask for the logs. You don't have to wait for 12 hours to get to the logs. On top of that, they can obviously be viewed on platform like this, but we can take them off platform and put them into a SIN tool like a Splunk, a QRadar, for more of your downstream analytics and reporting at the network and security operations level.
Okay. No, that was a great run through, Sam. I really like the simplicity of it, right? It was very easy to use from a user's perspective, very easy from an administrator's perspective. But I've got a question. We talked about these kind of supply chain attacks and where they're going to come from. There's one happening, maybe not exactly supply chain, but it's happening right now. I don't know if you've heard a big cloud vendor, Rackspace. Rackspace is going under a ransomware, kind of issue today. And that's got a lot of my customers asking me about that. They say, well, geez, I like putting stuff up in the cloud, but geez, now just when they get hacked, now all of my content's going to be out there as well. That's a huge problem that they see. So are you forcing me to come back and do everything on premise now? Or, what kind of options could we have out there?
Yeah, definitely. So, I think the benefit of cloud is undeniable, right? It's not going anywhere. Companies are going to continue to leverage it, but it's really focusing on what that cloud architecture is from the vendors that you're using. So I can go over to the whiteboard to kind of put that into picture here. But a lot of these vendors, right, they're using a multi-tenant environment in the cloud. It's a true SaaS offering. They're commingling data and infrastructure across their customer base. So you have 3 customers, right? The database is the same. The cloud environment is the same. This provides an obvious threat vector, whereas if there's a breach in one environment, the ability to breach the others is quite easy. On top of that, a lot of times the vendor is going to own the encryption keys. So ultimately, they have access to your data as well. So with a private content network, how we've kind of designed it is even when we host for our customers, we describe it more as infrastructure as a service as opposed to software as a service, right? Because we're really just managing the VMs, making sure that they're up and running in the environment, which is a VPC, single tenant, no commingled data or infrastructure. We're just making sure those machines are up and running. The content that actually sits on the application, as well as the application layer itself, is completely controlled by the customer. They own the encryption keys, and that's a key differentiator versus a lot of the players in the market.
Okay, so that's super important. Having the ability to essentially say, I can stay secure. I can still have it cloud hosted, but since I own the encryption keys, if in this example, like a Rackspace, if they were compromised, we're not anything related to Rackspace, but just in that kind of example, it's not my data that's going to get out there, right? It's all encrypted at that point. So, and again, all of the audit trails and logs to be able to prove.
Yeah, you can take the master keys off the platform as well, store them in an HSM. They're completely yours to control. You can rotate them as you see fit. So we put all of that control in the customer's hands, and that really resonates well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that was a great run through on kind of how the platform works. I mean, obviously, it's just a quick high level overview, get you kind of excited and thinking about how it works. We've got a couple of questions here I want to answer. Someone saw me logging in. They ask, do you support single sign-on? So SSO on the platform?
Yeah, so a huge piece of what we do is the ability to plug into existing infrastructure that you're already leveraging. So from an identity and access management standpoint, whether that's SAML-based SSO, or you're still using Active Directory on-prem, or maybe you're using both, we can plug into those tools, and users can authenticate in using them, and we can respect policies from them as well.
Great. So SSO is absolutely part of the platform. Yep. All right, next one, how's it deployed? We talked about it a little bit. Maybe let's expand it a little bit more. On-premise, cloud, what's the story?
Yes. So it's just
whatever you want.
It's a hardened virtual appliance, and so it's very flexible in terms of how it's deployed. We can go on-premise. A customer can self-host in their cloud environment, or again, we can host for them, or a hybrid of any of those. For our customers that are kind of looking for that highest level of security, whether they're within the government directly or working with the government, we also have a FedRAMP moderate authorized hosted option. That's especially relevant for companies that are beholden to CMMC. But yeah, very flexible in terms of how it's deployed. It can be clustered out globally as well. You saw when I was looking at the CISO dashboard, our demo environment is deployed across AWS in the globe. So we can really design it to fit their, the customer scalability, security, and cost concerns.
Okay, great. So lots of different options, but whatever I want, on-premise, great. Cloud, great. FedRAMP, great. It really is about what meets your compliance needs. I have a lot of customers that say, it's not worth arguing over cloud stuff, so either throw it in FedRAMP or we'll just host it ourselves and we don't have to have that argument.
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of close the loop on the integration point as well, the ability to plug into identity and access management is just one part. So we also support DLP and ATP versus via ICAP. We can plug into your SIM, as I mentioned earlier. You saw some of the native integrations with Microsoft. We don't want to come in and necessarily rip and replace, right? We just want to kind of funnel. So we can also plug into other cloud repositories like your SharePoints and OneDrives and Dropbox and Box, and just provide that additional layer when your user wants to share something out of those tools. They use Kiteworks, but we're not saying, hey, you need to get rid of it.
Yeah, no, I love that integration, like the ICAP with DLP. Maybe I already have DLP. I've already gone through the process of that. This is not exactly the same thing as DLP, right? It's a different kind of platform for different kinds of communication. So let's just snap into it and leverage that work that you've already created.
Right, exactly. So we want to enhance and allow you to get more out of the investments you've already made.
Okay, that's great. Another question, FedRAMP certification. I think we've already covered that. So FedRAMP authorized obviously in the cloud version of it.
So. So we're authorized at the moderate level. We are working towards high, so that will be coming in the next year or so here. But yes, so that is hosted in our AWS authorized environment.
Great, FedRAMP authorized for sure. What does user provisioning look like? How easy is it? So when we're creating those users, what's the process? Is it relatively straightforward? How's that work?
Yeah, so again, to your earlier point about making things frictionless, we've really designed the user provisioning process with that in mind.
Right.
So let's talk about your internal users first. So you're plugged into your Okta or your Azure AD from an SSO perspective. You can manage those users, create a group. Here's my group that needs Kiteworks access.
Right.
Those users go in, they see a SSO link, they authenticate in, they're in the platform.
Yeah, if you have SSO, that's for sure the right answer to do it, because that makes it really frictionless for the user. We would have created their account, they just hit the button for SSO and away they go. So
now for the external user, again, this is very low overhead, right? So we don't require that your end user is coming to your admin saying, hey, I need to add XYZ user so I can send sensitive content. They can add and provision that user, obviously with policies in place. We can blacklist domains, IPs, etc. But they can add a user to a folder, send that email. The recipient is just receiving a link. They click that link, they enter their email, the system recognizes that they are not a user on the system yet, and they're automatically stepped through the account creation process.
Okay. So that's a little bit different than a lot of stuff we do in IT, because it's usually almost always focused on internal corporate entities. We've got to think for a second, oh yeah, we might be sending it to vendor XYZ or customer XYZ that's not in my domain, has nothing to do with me, I can't control anything with that. So what you're saying is I can go in and, as the administrator, I can say, oh yeah, we've agreed that XYZ Corp we're doing business with, you can send it. Gmail, no thanks. But XYZ Corp, you're allowed to send that to. Then the user just sends a regular email and they get a link, and then that end user at XYZ Corp, they actually register into our Kiteworks instance. So they create their own account effectively if we give them the permission to do that. And that makes it pretty seamless for our end users.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, another good question, file size limitations. I know that's always a big struggle when we're talking about sending emails and so forth. Tell me about how this can help from a transmission perspective there.
Yeah, so Kiteworks actually started as a large file transfer focused company. So we really don't have a file size limitation. I mean, theoretically, it's 16 terabytes. I mean, that's more of a Linux issue than anything. So we can handle the facilitation of very large files, and even to kind of use, the use case you step through in Outlook, right? When something's sent via the Outlook plugin, we can actually bypass the Exchange file size limitation, because when that user clicks send, the file is just copied to the Kiteworks server.
Right. They're not really sending it via SNMP,
right?
SMTP.
Exactly.
They're actually they don't know this because they just hit the send button. They are uploading that file to our Kiteworks instance. It is then associating it with the email and knows the permissions and the rules and the policies and so forth. And so when the end user that receives that is going to get it, it never went through SMTP, or at least a notification did, but the actual file itself never ran on the SMTP channel. So that's, even for your Exchange admins and things like that, it's actually a great thing. Oh, I get less files sitting in here. My backups can be smaller and so forth. So
yeah, it really reduces wear and tear on Exchange. I've definitely talked to a lot of customers where that's been a huge selling point as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question, though. Next one, what about file retention / expiration? So can I control, does that file live forever?
Yeah, that's a great question. Completely configurable on the platform. So how long that file is retained for is set by policy, right? So if you want it to be super stringent, things are only living on there for, say, 3 days, you can set that. Or if it needs to live on for a longer period of time, it's completely configurable. You can enable different levels of policy as well for different user types, right? So you can say one department is allowed to keep files on the system for X amount of time, while another is only allowed to keep on for Y.
Right. Yeah, lots of good controls that we have over all of that. Okay, so it looks like that's most of our questions. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. A couple of follow-up items. Like I said, this was just meant to kind of get you interested in it. If you like what you saw today and you want to know more, please hit up one of our NCSI salespeople. Let's have a one-on-one demonstration with you, and we get into more details and talk a lot more about the technical stuff behind the scenes. So keep an eye out on your email. You're actually going to get a email from us with a survey that asks about questions of, kind of what was going on and how this worked and so forth. You fill that out and you get a gift card. So please do that. We're not the slimy sales organization maybe that you've dealt with at other entities. We're not going to, harass you for the next, 6 years until you buy a product. We try and take that pretty easy. So please fill out that survey. It helps us give feedback on how we kind of do these things. But Sam, thank you very much for attending.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was great.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation and how we can potentially try and solve some of these problems. So, and thank you everyone for attending today. We know your time is valuable and appreciate it. Please look out for that survey. If you have any questions or concerns, please put it in that survey results, and otherwise hit up your NCSI salesperson if you want to know more about it. But thanks everyone on the Kiteworks team for helping us get this set up. Thanks Sam and Larry on behind the scenes. We appreciate everyone. Have a great day.